Hello, I'm Kevin Berger, author of Atheism Untenable. I'm explicitly irreligious and agnostic. I don't need apologetics because there's no need to defend an argument that I don't make, and I can't logically shift the burden of proof for a claim I don't make. If you imply otherwise, you'll remove all doubt that you're intellectually dishonest and have no credibility. This is Justified Nonetheless. Please like, subscribe, share, and ring that notifications bell.
Steve McRae argues insistently that agnosticism is not the absence of knowledge, that it has nothing to do with knowledge. He argues that agnosticism is instead the middle ground between theism and atheism. He says that because if atheism is defined strictly in the weak sense, as an absence of belief in deities, then the superset of atheism, so defined, contains the subset of strong atheists who believe that no deities exist, which is not problematic. However, he argues, correctly, mind you, that if atheism is permitted to be defined in such a manner, to avoid the commission of a special pleading, then it must also be permitted to define the term theism in the weak sense as a mere absence of belief in the non-existence of deities, in which case strong theism would be a subset of those who believe that a deity does exist. The problem, therefore, is that in this schema, weak theists and weak atheists would then simultaneously be theists and atheists, which is contradictory and results in semantic erosion. In this video, I explain why McRae's schema, which holds that agnosticism is the neutral ground between atheism and theism, each defined instead in their respective strong sense, also creates contradiction, resulting in the same sort of semantic erosion, and propose another schema. Okay, so there are those who define the term agnosticism as being not BP and not B, not P. That means that they believe neither the proposition nor its negation, in which case that superset contains only the subset of the absence of belief. And that seems to be pretty straightforward. So if that is agnosticism, then the complementary superset would be Gnosticism. And that's because of the privative prefix A attached to the word agnosticism. This would be the logical counterpoint for that. And in that case, if agnosticism is not believing the proposition or the negation, then this set includes belief in either the proposition or the negation. Okay. So again, that seems pretty straightforward. It's you believe either one or the other, but not both. But let's think about this a little bit more deeply. You have belief, justification, and truth. And when those three things come together, you have knowledge under the canonical definition of justified true belief. JTB is knowledge. And so outside of that, you have these other three sections, which are going to be either beliefs that are untrue or beliefs that are not justified. And then using this definition of knowledge, then things that are justified or unjustified or true or untrue, as long as they're not believed, then they're not knowledge. That would be agnosticism. So far, so good. But what do we do with the unjustified and untrue beliefs? Well, if we put them with Gnosticism, well, then we have a problem because they don't fit the criteria to be considered knowledge. So they're not really Gnosticism. Okay, so now we have things that don't fit there. So okay, well, let's not do that. Let's put them over on the other side. So now we have agnosticism, including unjustified belief and false belief, because they don't fit the criteria for knowledge, so they don't really fit with Gnosticism. But now we have the problem where this set now contains the presence of unjustified belief, the presence of false belief, and the absence of belief. And that's contradictory too. So that doesn't really work either. So let's think about this a little more deeply. We have all entities, okay? So everything exists here. And then we can drill down and we have what I call pristine nescience, things that are not capable of belief, like rocks, for for example, and we have things that are capable of belief but don't believe yet for whatever reason. Okay? So then once the conditions have been met for the formation of belief, then we go down this path. If we don't, then we have the innocence, what Dr. Graham Oppie calls innocence. People who, for whatever reason, have not formed belief yet. For example, they haven't been introduced to the proposition. If you don't know what the proposition is, you can't have an opinion on it. Therefore, to discuss that in terms of belief or the absence of belief doesn't really make any sense. It's like saying, well, is a rock a carnivore, an herbivore, an omnivore? Well, rocks don't eat. So it's intrinsically incoherent to talk about it in those terms. Okay, so let's talk about things that where the conditions have been met. Well, then you have the option of the person either develops the doxastic position of believing the proposition, and then we have the option of believing negation over here, and that's all well and good. And then we have what I'm going to call apisticism, which is an absence of belief. And this is hypothetical because we don't have empirical evidence of an absence of belief. What we have are situations where people acknowledge that they don't know, and that's not the same thing. So, again, we have three different doxastic positions. We have you believe the proposition, you believe the negation, and you have the hypothetical absence of belief. You have three epistemic positions where you know that the proposition is true, you know that the negation is true, and then you have I don't know either way. Okay? And then you have what I call the dianoetic positions, which is the combination of them. So you can believe something is true and know that it's true. You can believe that something is true but not know that it's true. You can believe something is untrue and know that it's untrue, or in this case you're believing and knowing the negation is true. And you can believe the negation is true but not know that the negation is true. And then in blue here, what I have is it's a situation where the position is dependent on the proposition either being unjustified or untrue. And in all cases where someone says, I don't believe, fill in the blank, their reasoning is, I don't have good evidence, I don't have good reason, I need information, etc., etc., etc. And in all of those cases, what they're saying is, I don't have justification for this. And so what that does is, in this area, all of this is agnosticism. What you're saying isn't really that you don't believe it. You're saying, I don't know because I don't have sufficient justification to claim knowledge. Now, we'll have some people who will object and they'll say, but that's not how the term agnosticism is used in philosophical academia. Well, I beg to differ. Here we have a quotation from T.H. Huxley, the person who coined the term in the first place. And he says, when I reached intellectual maturity and began to ask myself whether I was an atheist, a theist, or a pantheist, a materialist or an idealist, a Christian or freethinker, I found that the more I learned and reflected, the less ready was the answer, until at last I came to the conclusion that I had neither art nor part with any of the denominations except the last. The one thing in which most of these good people were agreed was the one thing in which I differ from them. They were quite sure that they had a certain gnosis and had more or less successfully solved the problem of existence, while I was quite sure that I had not, and had a pretty strong conviction that the problem was insoluble. And with Hume and Kant on my side, I could not think myself presumptuous in holding fast by that opinion. So I took thought and invented what I conceived to the appropriate title of agnostic. It came into my head suggestively antithetic to the Gnostic of church history, who professed to know so much about the very things of which I was ignorant. And I took the earliest opportunity of parading it at our society to show that I too had a tail like the other foxes. Huxley also says, on another occasion, the fundamental principle of agnosticism is that one should not claim to know or believe that which cannot be demonstrated. And on another occasion, the agnostic principle may be stated in various ways, but they all amount to this, that it is wrong for a man to say he is certain of the objective truth of any proposition unless he can produce evidence which logically justifies that certainty. This is what agnosticism asserts, and in my opinion, it is all that is essential to agnosticism. Thus, my usage is aligned with Huxley's, which denotes an absence of knowledge and recognizes that apisticism is an ought. Clearly, the usage is aligned with the etymology of a plus gnosis and with Huxley's own usage. And someone might object to say, but that's not how the term agnosticism is used in philosophical academia now. Still wrong. The problem is that it is also very useful for philosophical purposes to have a name for the epistemological position that follows from the premise of Huxley's argument, the position that neither theism nor atheism is known. If agnosticism, in one sense of the word, is the position that neither theism nor atheism is known, then it might be useful to use the term Gnosticism to refer to the contradictory of that position, that is, to the position that either theism or atheism is known. When used in this epistemological sense, the word agnosticism can very naturally be extended beyond the issue of what is or can be known to cover a large family of positions, depending on the sort of positive epistemic status is at issue. This is from Draper of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Here we have another quotation from Antony Flew. Agnosticism, from the Greek agnostos, unknowable. Strictly speaking, the doctrine that humans cannot know of the existence of anything beyond the phenomena of their experience. And here's another quotation. It says, agnostic may add to this basic formulation some plausible explanation for the lack of knowledge and or epistemic justification. Thus formulated, agnosticism may be taken to be a form of skepticism about God's existence, analogous to, say, external world skepticism, which sets into doubt our capabilities of knowing anything about the existence of a reality external to our mind and thought, without explicitly denying the existence of such a reality. Yes, as evidenced, that is how the term agnosticism has been used within academia. Notice that in any case, agnosticism is inextricably tied to epistemic warrant, to justification. For this reason, it is better characterized as epistemic disposition than a doxastic disposition. What I'm getting at here is, because we know that belief isn't a choice, and we know that people do in fact believe things without justification, the fact that a particular proposition is recognized as lacking sufficient justification is not warrant in and of itself to presume a lack of belief, because there are other factors involved in belief formation that may cause one to believe something, whether it's justified or not. And some might say, well, that's not how the term Gnosticism is used in philosophical academia. I beg to differ. Gnosticism in the context of epistemology denotes a position that asserts the possibility of direct personal knowledge of ultimate truths, often contrasted with agnosticism's skepticism about such knowledge. In contemporary epistemology, Gnosticism refers to the position that certain knowledge or certainty in knowledge is achievable, countering the agnostic perspective that such knowledge is unattainable. Gnosticism in epistemological stance asserts that it is possible to have definitive, incontrovertible knowledge about specific aspects of reality, opposing the view that knowledge is inherently limited or uncertain. So, once again, yes, that absolutely is how the term Gnosticism has been used in academia, and if the term agnosticism is stipulated as one set, the complementary set is Gnosticism due to the privative prefix of a attached to the term agnosticism. Further, if agnosticism is defined as not believing P and not believing not P, then Gnosticism must be believing P or believing not P. And therein lies the problem, because it doesn't account for either unjustified or untrue beliefs. Given the established convention for the usage of privative prefixes, if we call the complementary set something other than Gnosticism, we are committing a special pleading. We use theism and atheism as complementary sets. The same must apply to Gnosticism and agnosticism. This is aside from the fact that the usage is contrary to the spirit in which Huxley himself used the term, which was in reference to knowledge and his recognition of an absence of belief as an ought, not necessarily and is. But language is descriptive, not prescriptive. This is not to argue that the usage to refer to doxastic state of not believing either proposition or its negation is wrong. Rather, it's to demonstrate that the schema that I'm suggesting isn't some great departure from academia. Contrary to McRae's frequent objection that this is not how the terms are used within academia. That simply isn't the case. There are cases where the term agnosticism is used to refer to a lack of knowledge rather than belief. And there are cases where the term Gnosticism is used to refer to the presence of knowledge rather than a philosophical or religious movement. I am only suggesting that these usages be adopted as a consistent formal convention, and I'm doing so with reason. 1. Defining agnosticism in terms of belief rather than knowledge accounts for neither unjustified nor untrue beliefs, creating tension because either agnosticism includes the absence of belief and the presence of unjustified and untrue beliefs, or Gnosticism includes both unjustified and untrue beliefs, despite these not meeting the criteria for the knowledge that the word Gnosticism suggests. 2. Regardless of the term being used, whether it be agnosticism, apisticism, non-belief, unbelief, or something else, this hypothetical state has not been demonstrated to exist in reality, as belief neither a pair of dichotomous proposition requires that one maintain and sustain a state of equipollence. Not only this has not actually been demonstrated, actual epistemic parity hasn't even been demonstrated. This is simply assumed. Indeed, since belief isn't a choice, and we know that people hold unjustified beliefs, the presumption of the absence of belief is an unjustified paradox that is evidence of the presence of an unjustified belief, causing it to implode. But what about the suspension of judgment? What about it? No one is disputing that it's possible to suspend judgment. Rather, the argument is that because the suspension of judgment is the recognition that one does not have justification for belief, that one is uncertain, unconvinced, unsure, etc., and while justification is a prerequisite for knowledge, it is not required for the presence of belief. Therefore, it is better associated with not knowing than not believing. Not knowing, herein labeled agnosticism, non-assertion, uncertainty, lack of justification, vacillation, open-mindedness, wanting to believe only true things, etc., do not, never have, and never will equate to or imply a genuine absence of belief, herein labeled apisticism, because knowledge, assertions of knowledge, certainty, justification, closed-mindedness, etc., are not prerequisites of belief in the first place. These are all irrelevant red herrings. Only equipollence can substantiate apisticism, and this must occur despite beliefs, biases, other cognitive factors, cultural influences, emotion, intuition, personal experience, pre-existing beliefs, social pressure, System 1 processing, and upbringing, all of which can also impact belief formation, which again is involuntary. This seems an unreasonable expectation given that most of these factors are beyond the subject's control. But apisticism is something you just made up. It's not used in any of the philosophical academia. In the context of epistemology, belief, or apisticism, refers to the state of holding a proposition P or its negation, not P, without necessarily having justified true knowledge. Apisticism, the state of neither believing P nor not P, aligns with the idea that belief should be withheld in the absence of sufficient evidence. No, these exact terms may not be used in academia. However, obviously, this distinction between Gnosticism and agnosticism, which refers to knowledge and is dealing with epistemology, and Pisticism versus apisticism, which refers to belief and deals with doxastic, is necessary to avoid the collapse in semantics that I keep describing. You can't have unjustified and untrue beliefs sandwiched in with agnosticism if you're defining agnosticism as an absence of belief. And you can't have unjustified belief and untrue belief sandwiched in with Gnosticism if Gnosticism suggests knowledge, and knowledge is canonically defined as justified true belief. So here we have a map. We have theism in red, we have atheism in blue. The objection is that by defining atheism in terms of negative sense, not believing P, both weak atheists and weak theists overlap, resulting in semantic erosion of the broader categories of atheism and theism. This is essentially the argument that Steve McRae makes, and I'm not going to deny that is correct. However, what I'm saying is, if you have theism in red and atheism in blue, then you have I know that a God is real, and you have I know that a God is not real, and in the middle you have someone that doesn't know either way. But then what does that mean with the unjustified and untrue beliefs? Where do they go? Where do unjustified and untrue beliefs belong in this schema? If placed with agnosticism, then agnosticism is no longer strictly an absence of belief. If placed with Gnosticism, then Gnosticism is no longer strictly knowledge. Both scenarios still result in the same sort of semantic erosion to which Steve McRae objects with the definition of atheism in the weak sense. He's doing the exact same thing. Clearly, the issue is with the presumed absence of belief that hasn't even been demonstrated. So there you have it. According to the colloquial schema, semantic erosion ensues due to defining atheism in the weak sense, obliging one to permit theism to be defined likewise in the weak sense. According to McRae's schema, semantic erosion occurs due to defining agnosticism as an absence of belief rather than an absence of knowledge. In both cases, I argue that the underlying issue is with the presumed existence of a doxastic disposition in which, despite the realities that we don't get to choose what we believe and what we don't, and the complexities of belief formation that are beyond our control, instead, I propose an alternative schema in which Gnosticism is defined as knowing either the proposition or its negation is true under the JTB model of knowledge, in which case this set contains only those propositions which are believed, justified, and true, and agnosticism is defined as an absence of this knowledge, containing the subsets of unjustified and untrue beliefs, as well as the heretofore unsubstantiated absence of belief, which I have instead termed as apisticism. And it bears in mind that because of the distinction between doxastics and epistemology, between doxastic dispositions and epistemic dispositions, yes, suspension of judgment does place one in the agnostic camp. However, as this is merely a recognition that belief is unjustified, it does not substantiate apisticism.